بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Welcome back to another session of Today I Have Perfected Your Religion. Inshallah, today we enter a new era of the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And with this new era, we find that the style, the rhetoric of the Quran changes accordingly. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to reveal verses in the Quran with a different feel, a different style to help the Prophet ﷺ and the companions navigate their new situation. Over the past several weeks, we spoke about the immigration phase when the Prophet ﷺ and the companions were leaving Mecca for Medina to make Medina their new home. And inshallah, from now on, we will be in the blessed city of the Prophet ﷺ. And one of the earliest chapters to be revealed during this era was Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter of the Quran, the longest chapter of the Quran. These verses are being revealed in these very early days, the first and second years of Hijrah. And so what you find in Surah Al-Baqarah is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to address many of these socio-political issues on the ground. And inshallah, over the next several sessions, we will take Surah Al-Baqarah section by section to see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was addressing this new society, this new era. And really, let's take a moment, because in order to fully benefit from these verses and only to fully benefit from the topic of this series, the goal of this series, we must always reflect and think about how we have gone through a situation, a scenario that may be similar to what the Prophet ﷺ, the companions were going through when they first entered Medina. And one way of doing this is by looking at the immigrant generation of Muslim Americans. When many of you left your native lands at a young age, maybe as a teenager or maybe as a young adult, and you came to America, this land that is quite different than your native land. The terrain is quite different. The climate is quite different. Most Muslims come from ethnicities whose origins are in a warmer climate. So whether they're from North Africa, such as our Moroccan or Libyan or Algerian or Egyptian brothers or Tunisian brothers and sisters, or from the Mediterranean area, such as those who come from Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, or maybe from the South Asian climate, which is different. Southeast Asian tends to be warmer. And many of you immigrated to cities in America like New York, like Chicago, like New Jersey, like Michigan, that are very cold, flat land. Even though you were accustomed and born and raised seeing mountains around you, quite a different terrain. Similarly, when the companions left Mecca for Medina, you're talking about a very major change. Now, in our times today, when we do Umrah, we do Hajj, all we do is simply take a bus from Medina to Mecca, or from Mecca to Medina, 5 hours, we're there. It's very simple. It's not too bad. Traveling 5 hours, whether it's by plane or by bus or by car, we don't do it super often, but we do it nonetheless. It's not too long of a trip. And when we travel 5 hours from one city to another, it's not that big of a change. And so if someone travels from let's say Los Angeles to San Francisco, it's about 6 hour, 5 hour, 6 hour, depending on traffic, trip. It's not that big of a change. You're still in the same state. The terrain is similar. The climate is similar. Same thing, someone who goes from Chicago to Detroit. It's a 4 hour drive. Not too big of a deal. Maybe from Dallas to Houston, 4 or 5 hour drive. It's not too big of a deal. Not too much change. Or somewhere in Pakistan or Malaysia, you travel 5 hours, not too big of a change. This is not what the companions were experiencing. Going from Mecca to Medina was a major change for them. Number one, the terrain is different. Notice the next time you go to Mecca and Medina, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open the doors of Hajj and Umrah, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and give us the ability to visit the beautiful city of Medina, the Prophet ﷺ city, and the blessed city of Mecca, Ya Rabb al-Alameen, inshallah. Notice the terrain difference. Mecca is very desolate. The mountains are very rocky. The terrain is very hard. And so Mecca is not an agricultural land. You don't really find plants and trees, and you don't find that in Mecca. What we see now, that's human grown, meaning human beings brought dirt, put it in a certain area, and planted trees and grass. That is man-made. Most of the plant life in Mecca is man-made. Most of it, most of it is man-made. And even if you were to take a taxi out and drive around the outskirts of Mecca, actually get out of the city, what you find is that it is a very mountainous area. And so Ibrahim ﷺ described this area as wadin, ghayri dhi zara', a valley. Mecca is in a valley. Why? Because it's surrounded by mountains. We don't really notice this because when we're in the heart of Mecca, we're looking around us. It's very busy. There's a lot of traffic. We don't really notice the terrain, all the buildings, the skyscrapers there. We don't really notice the terrain. But Ibrahim described it ﷺ perfectly. It is a valley. It is in a valley with no plant life. غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ, no plant life. Right? And so that is Mecca. Medina is actually quite different. Medina does have mountains, right? But it's not in a valley. Medina is kind of a little bit, the land kind of enclaves. And so if you were to find a good spot in Medina, in the outskirts, where you can see the open land and clearly, you can see how the terrain is. It's not surrounded by mountains. There are mountains, but not like the density of Mecca. And Medina goes inside and enclaved a little bit. And essentially, how this makes Medina different than Mecca is that Medina is very, very fertile. You find a lot of gardens, a lot of palm trees in Medina. And so agriculture was really the profession for those living in Medina. A lot of palm trees, a lot of gardens, and you have the flat land to be able to establish these gardens. You also have the dirt that is fertile that can help these plants grow. Also, one of the main differences is that Medina is just slightly warmer than Mecca. The climate is a little bit different. But when you're talking about these types of distances back then, that slight difference wasn't just, oh, it's a little bit warmer today than what we're accustomed to, we'll get used to it. But rather, with that change in climate comes change in bacteria and viruses that are lingering around the air. And so when the companions immigrated, a lot of them got sick. A lot of them got very sick. And I believe some passed away as a result of the sickness. So notice when, for our immigrant brothers and sisters, when you take your children back to your ethnic countries, what happens to them very often? They get sick. I remember this when I was younger and we would go to Palestine. I remember that we would get sick early on. There were certain types of food we couldn't eat, or if it's cooked in a certain way, we wouldn't eat it. Why? Because the bacteria and the viruses would really harm us. Whereas the natives of that area, they ate it, no problem. Such as the water, for example. They might drink tap water from wells, and their body has already developed the antibodies, the immunity towards those viruses. When these companions are entering this new area, they didn't have those antibodies. Some got sick, and I believe some passed away. So it was a major change. Also, another major change was that now the Muslims had to face south in order to face the Qibla. I'm sorry, they had to face north in order to face the Qibla towards Jerusalem. Now in Mecca, what the Prophet ﷺ would do was he would go to the southern end of the Kaaba and face north. This way he is facing both the Kaaba and Jerusalem. He was facing both of these Qiblas. But when he's in Medina, he can only face one, and Allah commanded him then to face north. and to remain facing north towards Jerusalem. And we'll get more into that in a later session. But with that, it brought about certain social challenges. And so when Surah Al-Baqarah begins, it begins by categorizing society. The Prophet ﷺ, and this is a fourth difference, I should say, when they were in Mecca, they were with their tribesmen. And somehow most of them were related. First cousin, second cousin, third cousin, whatever it is. They met back at a particular grandfather, a great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. All of them come from the same type of lineage. And most of them went back to Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam and Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. And so, you have this type of, we're of the same blood here. There was really no differentiation in terms of society. We're tribesmen, we are now disagreeing on theology. But when they enter Medina, they are now immigrants. And they are looked at as immigrants. And they have to deal with the challenges that immigrants have to deal with. Like the immigrants who are watching this show. When you came, what did you have? It's not like today where when you travel, you have thousands of dollars in your pockets, and then you have tens of thousands of dollars, maybe, inshallah, ya Rabbil Alameen, in your bank account. And if something happens abroad, you can use your credit card. Now it's international. Or you can withdraw money internationally. You can have someone wire you money. It wasn't like that. When you came to America, when the companions went to Medina, they had absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. SubhanAllah. And they had to build themselves, reestablish themselves. And that was their situation. So they were looked at as immigrants who had nothing. And what we find also is that in the geopolitical world, when you have an area, a country that is enduring a civil war or war, you find that much of the natives begin to immigrate to a neighboring country, another country. And when that happens, they tend to leave with nothing. And now you have large amounts of people entering a country without any money. And so they become a burden on the economy of the land. I noticed this happened to us when we were when I was in Jordan. When the Syrian civil war began, you had tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Syrians entering Jordan, and they didn't enter with money. They left with their lives. That's all they had, maybe a backpack with some clothes. And what ended up happening is you have a lot more traffic in the city. The rent prices of apartments skyrocketed, right? The job opportunities became less and less. And so the natives, they became frustrated. Now, of course, in Islam, these are our brothers and sisters. We must embrace them. We must help them. That is part of Iman. We cannot look at them differently simply because we see them as, or we perceive them as being a burden on our economy. Allah is Ar-Raziq, not our economy. Allah is the one who provides, not the economy. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help us get through if only we had the good heart, the heart of Iman to help our brothers and sisters. But that's a different topic. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins Surah Al-Baqarah by addressing really what's going on in society. And you have the first about 20 verses of the Quran, of Surah Al-Baqarah, talking precisely about this. Allah begins by talking about the attributes of the believers. Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ وَمَا أُنزِلَ مِنْ قَبْلِكَ وَبِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ يُوقِنُونَ أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَى هُدًى مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the attributes of the believers, and He gives us 4 verses. Talks about how we are people who believe in the unseen, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we do not see Allah. Allah isn't tangibly perceivable. We believe in that. We believe in paradise and the hellfire. We believe in the day of judgment, even though these things are not seen to us. But we believe in their existence or in their coming. We believe in the unseen, and we establish prayer, and we give zakat. وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. And we believe in what Allah has revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, meaning the Quran. And we believe in what was revealed prior to the Prophet ﷺ, meaning the previous divine revelation, including the Bible and the Torah. And Allah says these are the victorious people. These are the ones who are on guidance, and these are the ones who are victorious. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, notice what He mentions. These are the ones who are on guidance, and these are the ones who are successful. It's very important to understand this point. When a person enters a new land, a new society, they are automatically in a weaker place, a weaker position. Now there are certain hegemonic forces, social, cultural, political, whatever it may be, these forces that work in a manner that shape the customs of the land, shape the mindset, the perception of a land. And when you enter upon this, these forces can often be overwhelming. They can often begin to change the person. And so, again, going back to our brothers and sisters, our aunts and uncles who immigrated to America, you understand this more than anyone. You came to America, you are a very small minority. There were no masajid when you first came. Maybe there was a masjid, but how many people attended the masjid? A handful? And I hear the stories from my parents, what it was like in the 70s and in the 80s, the early 80s. You know, the biggest masjid in Chicago, or at least one of them, was established, I believe, in 1982. 8 years after my dad came to America. They didn't have any of this. There was no care. There was no Islamic relief. There were no Islamic institutions, Islamic schools. And now they are kind of a Muslim wandering in this new land, huge land, which is a powerful and sophisticated land. And they're going to the universities, learning from the education. And now you have all of these forces impacting the person, shaping who they are. And what do we do then? Even till this day, today, my generation and the third generation of American Muslims, we are bombarded by cultural forces, by the mass media, by Hollywood, by entertainment, by the culture, by American culture. And this affects the way we see things, the way we engage one another. And a very obvious way to see this is when you take an American and put him or her in a different country. When you take them to your ethnic lands to visit for the summer, I mean, how much do they fit in, really? They're seeing the natives of a different country will very quickly pick up on the fact that this person is not a native of this land, even though they look exactly like each other. Oh, the way you dress, oh, you must be an American. You know, I remember when I first went to Jordan, it was very normal for a man to hold another man's hand, or to put his arm in another man's arm. That was normal. That's expressing friendship, expressing love. It wasn't sexual in any way. But me growing up, that was really weird. No man holds the hand of another man, or else, you know, we're perceived of a certain orientation, a certain inappropriate orientation. But over there, it's so casual. And so they would grab my hand, and I'd feel so uncomfortable. And in the early days I was there, I would actually get mad and say, don't do that. I don't like that. And they'd give me such a strange look. It's like, what? It took me about a year to actually get used to it. And you have this going on. You have all these forces now affecting the person, and it can lead them different ways. So Allah begins Surah Al-Baqarah in the era, in a new era, in a new society, which will have its own hegemonic forces, its own culture, its own tradition, its own way of doing things, right? And Allah tells us, these are the successful people. These are the people who are in guidance. Be careful. Be careful, O Americans, American Muslims, especially those who are younger. A lot is going on. A lot is changing in America. Don't think just because culture deems this okay, that it is automatically okay. Do not think that because so-and-so celebrity has endorsed a certain practice, has endorsed a certain orientation, that it makes that orientation or that practice okay. We have our guidelines, our parameters. Allah has told us what is a true Muslim, who is a true Muslim, what characteristics they must have, what beliefs they must endorse, what they must adhere to, and tells us these are the people who are on guidance. And things become extremely difficult when the Muslim is coming from a weaker position, socio-political position, just like, again, our immigrant aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters. When they came from their native countries, in comparison to America, they're very weak. Things have changed now a little bit, but nonetheless, it remains the same, where in comparison, our ethnic countries are much weaker than America, are much less economically flourishing than America, or economically powerful than America. And so you have this type of perception. These people, this new society is stronger than me. They are wealthier than me. They are more sophisticated than me. They are more accomplished, more established than me. The West defeated, if you want to use that word, defeated the Ottoman Empire, defeated Muslim civilization. And then you enter this new land, and that places the person in a type of inferiority complex. No, my dear brothers and sisters, these are the people who are on guidance. It has nothing to do with how much money a person has. It has nothing to do with how sophisticated they are. It has nothing to do with how large their country is, how strong they are politically, how strong they are culturally. Nothing to do with that. The successful ones are those who have these beliefs, believe in the unseen. They establish prayer. They give their zakat. They believe in the Quran. They believe in the other divine revelations. These are the successful people. And then continuing these verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the disbelievers and gives them two verses. The disbelievers, some people, their hearts are so hard that they'll never accept. Even if you present Islam in the most effective way, in the most convincing way, some people just don't want to believe. Nothing we can do about them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you will find some disbelievers like that. But notice Allah only gives them two verses. Why? It's as if Allah is alluding to the fact that really the concerns of the Muslims or the disbelievers, those who reject, are really the least of the concerns of believers. If you maintain your iman, if you do what you're supposed to do, the disbelievers most often will just leave you alone. Every now and then you have major events that go on, like the Crusaders, like the Mongols, like what we see now in colonialism or post-colonialism. But you find that these are very small parts of our broader history. In general, disbelievers, they don't really do much against believers. But when you get into the third category, that is the hypocrites. Allah talks about them a lot in these verses. I believe it's 9 to 12 verses. I forgot exactly how much. That Allah talks about the hypocrites. Surah At-Tawbah, a big chunk of that large chapter is talking about hypocrites. There's a chapter titled The Hypocrites. Why? Allah is giving us a very clear indication, a very clear warning that this group of people, these types of people, are the most detrimental to the ummah. And this is what we find throughout Muslim history, these types of people. And as we go through the Medinan era and the Medinan chapters, inshallah, we'll go more and more into the hypocrites, who they are and what they do. But to conclude this session, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about society. These are the three categorizations of the new Medinan society. That doesn't mean that this particular categorization is sufficient for every single society. Sometimes you might have an extra type of categorization, and sometimes you might remove something like the hypocrites. When our immigrant uncles and aunts came to America, there really was no hypocrite group. Right? Now, with Islam kind of rising in America, these institutions, we start feeling a sense of, a type of hypocrisy maybe being formulated. But in general, these are the three categories. What is it telling us? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala categorizes people based on what? Based on their faith, based on their relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not based on human relationships between each other. What we call today race, what we call today ethnicity, what we call today heritage, what we call today nationality. This is very new, very recent. And I don't mean here that anyone who has or considers themselves to be part of a particular nationality that they are going against Iman or Islam. But what I would like to say is that Allah could care less about those things. Don't think just because you are from a certain country, a certain city, a certain land, that means anything to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even if you're from the blessed city of Medina, the blessed city of Mecca, that does not make you better with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just because you are of this country or that country, absolutely meaningless to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's not even going to ask you about it on the day of judgment. But what is important, what Allah will ask about, is our Iman. And this is how we should see society. And before someone says that that's discriminatory, right? It doesn't have to be discriminatory. Race is discriminatory. Yet the Western world has adopted the system of categorizing people based on race and nationality. Right? So just because there's a type of categorization does not necessitate discrimination. I see so-and-so as a Christian, I see so-and-so as a Jew, I see so-and-so as an atheist, does not mean that now I see them as an enemy per se. It does not mean that my Sharia is now going to tell me to harm those individuals. We know as Muslims that's not the case. And we have interfaith activities. We collaborate with partners from different faiths, from organizations, institutions that are non-Muslim, and we seem to get along just fine. But at the same time, we believe as Muslims that when we look to one another as Muslims, what we see first and foremost is our Islam. And my relationship to my fellow Muslim is that they are a Muslim. And for those who choose not to enter the realm of faith, not to become Muslim, then we will see them according to what religion they adopt, what religion they identify by. And this way we can at least begin to have a conversation, recognize each other for the faith that the other person has. And Islam, as we know, tells us, give them their freedom to choose their faith. Yes, we believe Islam is the truth, and Islam leads to paradise. And those who reject Islam will have severe consequences on the day of judgment. We believe that. But when it comes to how we engage one another, I see so-and-so's faith, and I leave them free to obey, to practice their faith. But also what that does is, if I see so-and-so according to their faith, then our discussions will very much, or can very much, revolve around those theological discussions, that we can easily and comfortably have these discussions with non-Muslims about what Islam is. Or else, if so-and-so is I see so-and-so as an American and so-and-so as a Canadian, it's not really going to bring about religious conversations. I might ask them, hey, how are things up in Canada? How is the economy? What public services does your country offer you? That seems to be more in line with this identity of I'm an American and you're a Canadian. But when I'm a Muslim and you're a Christian or a Jew, whoever it may be, the conversation might revolve around something quite different. And generally speaking, that's how people identified themselves back in the day. There was no race, there was no ethnicity as we know it today. There were no borders that define a nation state. And so it was very natural to identify each other according to their religious tradition. And so we as Muslims must develop a stronger identity, a stronger cognition of our religious identity, that I identify first and foremost as a Muslim before I identify as a Palestinian or a Syrian or a Pakistani or an Indian or a Malaysian or an Indonesian, whatever it may be. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us in this identity, our religious identity of ours, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevate us, because we believe that none is worthy of worship except Him, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.